Welcome to another conversation on the All About You podcast. It is exactly what it sounds like, a podcast dedicated to the interesting, the wonderful and the eclectic world of you. I have created this podcast as a journey of discovery about people for you, the listener. Past episodes have included reading tarot cards, a Black London cabbie and a voice actor, to name just a few. So today I'm sitting here with my guest, Caroline Orman. She has written her story of the domestic abuse that she suffered. So, Caroline, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I have to say, I'm very nervous about doing this podcast.
Okay.
I have read your book, and sitting here with you, knowing what you have gone through, I'm not sure where this is going to go.
Okay, well, just to put your mind at rest, it was a very, very difficult time. It was a while ago. For me, the book was part of the healing process. It was really cathartic to write it, and it was difficult to write parts of it. It was very personal, and there were things that were quite emotional for me to write and to drag up. But I think now enough time has passed, enough. You know, obviously when you write a book, you have to edit and rewrite and stuff, and I've done that numerous times, so I kind of feel like the story happened to someone else. And my main aim now with the book is to other women and men, I want people to read it and understand how complicated this topic is. Domestic abuse is not simple, it's not straightforward, it never is. Everyone's situation is different, but I want to start a conversation about this and educate people and just raise awareness of it.
You've titled the book The Other Side of Fear. So I'm hoping that you are now feeling in a good place.
Absolutely. I mean, I chose that. I love the quote in the book. It's by George Adair. Everything you ever wanted is on the other side of fear. And I remember quite recently when I was either going through the situation or I had just come out the other side, and I saw that quote and I thought, that is inspirational to me, because a lot of the time it was fear that kept me trapped. There were other things that kept me trapped that I talk about in the book, but the overwhelming emotion was fear. And I felt that it's actually completely true. If you get through that fear, I have a life now I could only have dreamed about. I couldn't have imagined it. You know, Sheila, when I was thinking about leaving my husband, who was very abusive, there were all kinds of problems, I had a perception or a picture in my mind of my future, that I would be living in a bedsit, struggling to pay my rent and bills, probably sharing a house with other people, you know, working in a cafe or something. I had no idea this could be my life, and that scenario was preferable to staying with him, even if I had to do that. I imagined myself, you know, a single mother with no money, and that was all I could hope for. And this is just beyond my imagination.
So let's go to the beginning of your story. How did you meet this man?
So I met my husband Serkan, who was Turkish. I met him at typical, stereotypical story holiday romance, except it wasn't typical. We met each other on holiday. We kept in touch like pen friends for I think 5 or 6 years, during which time I lost contact with him because it was just a teenage romance, kind of, not even a romance, friendship. Then I went back to the town where I met him, in the book is called Moralia, with a friend, and ran into him by chance. And then we were older by then, and then we started this kind of amazing romance. I was head over heels in love with this man. We lived together for a short time in Moralia. Shortly after that, I went back and lived with him. And then eventually he came and lived with me in London. I started my career as a nurse. He started his career. We were fine. We were 12 years in London. He was very westernized. So yeah, that was kind of the story behind the story.
So you had a long period of time together, rolling along quite happily.
I mean, it wasn't perfect. I don't think any relationship is. You know, once again, hindsight is 20/20 vision. When I look back, there were red flags, but I was in love with him, first of all, Also, I made a lot of allowances for him because of he was from a different culture. It wasn't easy for him living in the UK because his language skills weren't, he wasn't native. He spoke English well, but not native. He didn't have qualifications. I was the breadwinner. I got all that. And there were little temper outbursts now and again. Like, he never did anything to me, but he would have little fits of rage. Not frequent, but enough that now it would worry me. If I were in a relationship now, that would be it, like the first time. But he would, the thing is with these men, they're very manipulative. He would be super apologetic afterwards. He would explain that he didn't mean it, that he felt awful, all of this. So there was nothing hugely worrying about his behaviour. But yeah, looking back, there were signs that he had a temper. But I think being in the UK kind of, how can I put this? He was surrounded by a different culture. He was with different people. I was earning a lot more than him. There was a power shift, and he was afraid of the British police, as you would be. And when we moved back to Turkey, those things no longer existed. There was a huge shift in that I went from being the main breadwinner to being a stay-at-home mom. He earned all the money and did what he wanted with it. We were in his country, in his culture. I didn't speak the language. I was like he was when he came to the UK, only worse. I didn't speak a word of Turkish when I first moved there. I didn't know anyone. I didn't have a job. I didn't have anything. And there was a power shift. And plus, I think that culture, I don't want to blame it on culture because that's not an overriding factor. There's plenty of, men from every country that are abusive, and there's lots of Turkish men that are not abusive. But there is a certain difference in culture in that his behaviour towards me got less and less respectful, and it was reinforced rather than, in very subtle ways, rather than being, come on mate, you can't speak to your wife like that, or come on, go home and help with the kids. They reinforce it by laughing, by all this kind of patriarchal kind of slap on the back. Yeah, this is what we men do. We don't listen to our wives. There's a word in Turkish, kibarlık, which means henpecked. And it's like the biggest insult you can say to a man is that you're henpecked, like you're under your wife's thumb. So there were all of these factors. And then, he completely changed. U-turn changed. Yeah.
Let's pick up the story then. You've moved back to Turkey. Mm-hmm. And you're in this situation, foreign country, don't speak the language, haven't got a job, absolutely.
And I had a 1-year-old.
Right, I mean, that's a lot of pressure at the best of times. Yeah. When did you think, okay, this has sort of tipped over from being maybe a cultural thing to, maybe there is something, a bit bigger problem?
There was no moment. I mean, I put up with it for a long time because, as I say, I loved him, rightly or wrongly, and I felt like we would be okay. I felt that the move was very stressful. I had a baby, then I had another baby quite soon after. There were all kinds of factors, and I just made excuses, and I kept thinking, it will get better, it will get better. And after we'd been there about 2 years, I bought this beautiful villa, absolutely stunning. And I really believed wholeheartedly that this was it. Now we had this beautiful home. Because another factor that comes up a lot in the book is his mother. His mother, Gulshen, was interfering constantly in us. She would take his side. She would nitpick me. She didn't like me. We came to blows a lot. I mean, I joked that I learned Turkish arguing with her, but I kind of did. I mean, that I had to learn Turkish to defend myself because this woman was in everything. And that was another factor because he was in the middle of it. He didn't want his wife and his mother fighting, but we just could not get on. I bought this villa and it was absolutely, I thought that was it. We were away from her. We were far enough away from her that we could live our life, beautiful, peaceful village. Children could play outside. I had all these dreams of this villa and it just got worse. I mean, he was never home. He was always out. I never knew where he was. Yeah, we didn't have anything like the same relationship. And I think that the tipping point for me was when he would have these rages. If I said anything at all that he didn't like, he would blow up. He never hit me, but he would blow up. For example, if there was food on the table, if we were eating, he would throw everything on the floor, just sweep it on the floor with his hand. He would throw, if I had made food he didn't like, he'd throw it out in the garden, or he'd throw it from an upstairs window. kicking tables, breaking tables, yelling at the children, just this kind of intimidation. And I got so used to these rages, they were getting more and more often. He didn't hit me, but he would block me a lot. This is a big guy. He was 140 kilos. He was large, and he would block me, like block doorways, not let me pass, hold me by the wrist, hold me by the throat. You know, there were no marks. Like, I didn't ever feel that this was abusive, weirdly, because he didn't put marks on me. He didn't hit me. I'd seen pictures of women with broken arms, you know, bruises across their face. That wasn't me. But it was I was terrified of him, basically, absolutely terrified of his rages. And I felt at some point he's going to really hurt me because he's going to lose it. And that was the point at which I thought, okay, the bedsit is better than this. I just have to get out. I have to get out. But I felt that meant it was a very difficult decision for me because he had complete control. I had stupidly put the villa in his name, even though I paid for it. We had 4 apartments, which I think they were in my name at the time, but he had control over everything. And because it was easier, because we were in his country, I didn't have citizenship at the time I bought the villa, so it would have been a lot of paperwork, all these reasons. So he had control of everything, and we were in his country, and he knew people, police, politicians, and he never got bored of telling me that, if you leave me, I will destroy you.
I think it's an interesting thing in the book. You talk about the WGP,
yes.
the Wives and Girlfriends Police, that wherever you went,
they
got back as to where you had been, who you had spoken to.
This is definitely something I found very sinister about the culture that I've not really seen in it. I'm sure it goes on in other cultures, but you know, going from a big city like London, nobody knows what you're doing and nobody's interested. This is a small town. Moralia is a small town, and yeah, they watch their wives and girlfriends. Men watch each other's wives and girlfriends and sisters, you know, and everyone knows everyone's business. And it's kind of, I would go out and he would say, oh, you had your lunch with Atacam today, oh, you're my friend of mine. So not in a nasty way, but just letting me know that he knew where I was at all times. Yeah, and I found that quite strange. Another thing that happened is sometimes he would go to the UK in winter because it's a holiday town. So often there's no work in winter, and he'd go to the UK to work in a cafe. And I would have, you know, once a week, a visit from a male relative of my husband. They never came into the house, because if they were seen coming into the house, that would be gossip. They would wait on the doorstep. Oh, Yenga, which is how they address you as like a respectful term. Just checking that everything's okay. And I realised that he was keeping tabs on me. They were probably calling him and saying, oh yeah, your wife's home, don't worry. Very strange, yeah.
I mean, it must be quite difficult to live under those circumstances when you just know everybody you've spoken to, every time you go to the supermarket, that's going to be reported back.
Yeah, it didn't bother me. I found it strange because it's not how we operate in the UK, but there's a lot of things I had to adapt to culturally in Turkey, a lot. I mean, I love Turkey, I love the culture, but in the beginning it was a huge shock. Just the way of the people, you know, the neighbours will come around and read my electricity bill that will be stuck to my gate and then tell me how much it is. There's just less boundaries. People are more into each other's business, but they are the warmest, kindest, friendliest, most hospitable people I've ever met in my life, and they're great. But it didn't, although I was aware that he was not keeping, they do it, I think it's unspoken. I don't think he would be saying to his friends, oh, watch for my wife, you know, watch for my sister. He did the same to his sister. You know, but they just report back. They just automatically call, oh, you know, I saw so-and-so, just casually, but it is sinister. But it didn't bother me particularly in the beginning because I had nothing to hide. I wasn't doing anything. I was just going around my day. And I thought, if you want to know that I went to the supermarket at 4 p.m, then okay. It's funny because he was very westernized. He'd lived 12 years in London with me. He wasn't controlling in the sense that he didn't mind me going out with friends. He didn't mind me drinking alcohol, wearing Western clothes. I did all of those things. He was fine with that. But he liked to know, I suppose he did know, because people would tell him where I was and who with. But he wasn't controlling in that way. Like, he didn't say, oh no, you're not going out and you're not behaving like an English woman, because I'm an English woman. And he was okay with that.
So let's talk about your decision to go. Now, you've got 2 young children, so it's not a case of just picking up your passport, packing a small bag and going.
No.
So let's talk about that decision to go?
Mm-hmm. Well, as I say, his rages were just getting worse and worse. I felt he was going to hurt me at some point because he'd come pretty close a couple of times. There was one particular fight that I remember where he threw a glass of wine at the wall and grabbed me by the wrist and was trying to like pull me back onto the sofa, and I got away from him, went to the downstairs bathroom, locked the door. I just remember thinking you have to get somewhere where there's a lock, and that was the closest place. And he was banging on the door, hammering on the door, telling me to come out, woke the children up. That was an awful night, and I ended up driving to one of my best friend, Azra, who turned out to be she was a lawyer, to her house. And I remember sitting in her living room saying, I can't do this. Because up until that point, I kind of thought, you know what, if I'm subdued, docile, if I clean really well the house, if I cook really well for him, if I have sex with him whenever he wants, if I'm compliant with him, I can avoid most of these rages, and I can, for my children, stay in this beautiful home, stay with the life that we have, keep them stable. I can put up with it until I'm old enough, until they're old enough, right? Because I felt at that time that to leave him, I would have to leave Turkey. There was no way I could stay because it just wasn't possible. But yeah, I was just terrified of what he... And the other thing that was a huge factor in me deciding to leave was the way he was with my daughter. He was starting to do to her what he did to me in terms of criticizing her, massively, blatantly favoritizing her brother over her, deliberately, saying, oh, I'm going to take him out for ice cream because he behaves the way I want and you don't. This is a 7-year-old, and things like she would draw a picture and he would tell her it wasn't very good, and, just this bullying. And when he started doing that to her, I just thought, no, because she's going to grow up thinking that's normal. And she's going to end up in the same kind of relationship. Also, for my son to see that kind of behavior is modeling this kind of behavior for him as well. And I just thought, anything's better than this. I cannot stay here because it's affecting my kids' childhood. I mean, they had this beautiful idyllic childhood on one side where they had, lots of friends and this gorgeous house and everything, but I could see the effect his mental bullying was having on my daughter. And that coupled with his increasingly insane rages that were getting worse and worse and more. It was getting like twice a week, and nothing I could do would placate him. I used to be able to be quite careful not to set him off, but he would blow up over the smallest thing. And yeah, I mean that was just it. I think with every relationship, every relationship, but certainly every domestic abuse relationship, there is a tipping point at which you decide, I can't do even one more day. I mean, I had planned in the back of my head, I'll stay 10 more years. When the kids are older, I'll sort of go away quietly. But no, I got to the point where I couldn't stay one more day. Another thing that happened, interestingly, was I hit 40. And I think 40 is a big milestone. And I think you maybe reassess your life at 40. And I just thought, you know what, I can't do this anymore. I can't even, think about, I can't imagine I'm 40, I'm still young enough to have a life. I'm still young enough to meet someone else. I'm still young enough to be happy. I'm not putting up with this. It's something that shifts in your brain, I think, about turning 40.
You've got to that tipping point. You've made the decision to go.
Yeah.
What was your plan?
My plan initially was to take my children and leave, because I thought that was the only thing I had available to me. So I was trying to make sort of tentative steps to go back to the UK. That's what I thought I would have to do, is go back to the UK. I could do a return to nursing course, get back into nursing, somehow get my kid. I don't know. I didn't want to. I had been too long out of the UK to go back. I didn't want to go back to that. But I thought that was kind of my sort of plan. I just thought I'll get a ticket.
Because you had family still in the UK.
I did. I mean, there is another issue. I don't want to say bad things about my family. But yeah, it wasn't that straightforward as to go back and stay with them. That's all I'm going to say. I had made some queries about that, and it wasn't likely or possible. Okay.
But at least the UK was where you came from, what you knew.
Yeah. But I didn't want to move back to the UK for various reasons. For the reasons that I left the UK. Also, he would find me in the UK. I mean, he knew where my family lived. He knew where my friends lived. He would find me in a day in the UK. So I didn't want to go back for several reasons, but I didn't think I had a choice. I thought that was my kind of, I didn't have a plan at that point. I knew I had to get out. I had to, for my kids' sake, for my sake, but I didn't really have a firm plan. It was only when I spoke to my lawyer and told her that I was leaving him and that I had to go back to the UK. She was like, why do you have to, you don't have to do anything. You have a job here, you have a life here, you've been here 10 years. By that point, I've been here there 8 years. You know, why would you go back to the UK? She was baffled. And I said, because he's dangerous. And she's like, oh, come on, he can't do anything. He's like a dog with no bite. He's just barking. She said, this is what men do, don't worry. You've got laws, there are laws. You'll be fine. She says, you have a great lawyer. She winked at me and said, you have a great lawyer.
So she really convinced you
Yeah.
not to go to the UK.
Just
could stay in
Yeah.
Turkey.
She said you're in a stronger position than he is. He is just telling you this because he's terrified that you will leave. You have a much better job than him. You're the children's mother. You will get custody 100%. And I said, he's violent. Like he has a temper, and he's, it's getting worse. And she says, oh, there's police. Don't worry. Like, it's the same laws here as it is in the UK. You are protected.
So you felt more comfortable then. Okay, I feel okay. I can stay in Turkey.
Yeah.
What happened after that?
Well, it was very insidious. I filed for divorce, and I didn't feel safe to be in the villa, so I moved out of the villa into a place of my own. And I don't want to give too much of the plot of the book away, but
no.
Yeah, it was very insidious. A huge amount of manipulation. Basically, my lawyer told me, do not have any contact with this man because he will try and manipulate the situation in any way he can. So, but I did. I after several months had gone by, I kind of wanted to be amicable with him, I suppose. We have children together. I didn't want there to be a fight. He was absolutely broken. I mean, that's the one thing I did not expect from him. He was apologetic. He was remorseful. He wanted another chance. And I said, no, this is my decision.
So you stuck to your guns?
I did, but I was foolish in the sense that I kind of felt it didn't have to be an awful breakup. We had been together a long time. I didn't think we had to be like at each other's throats at all. And he was really falling apart. I mean, he seemed to be really falling apart. And I'll admit I felt sorry for him.
I must admit, I was reading one bit in the book when you did meet him and you were given the advice by your lawyer, no contact.
Yeah.
And I'm shouting at you in the book.
Yeah.
Because you did meet with him.
I did, but on that particular occasion, that's the first time I think I did meet up with him after he'd been persisting for several months, that he just wanted to be friends, he just wanted to talk to me. And I was quite strong. I said, you have to go through the lawyer and all of this, which she had advised me to do. And then my sister was getting married that July. This was, I think, April or something. So she was getting married, had this whole huge wedding planned. And my children were so excited to go to their aunt's wedding. They were a page boy, flower girl. They were in the ceremony. My daughter was going to read a poem. I mean, it was just all huge. Anyway, what happened is my ex-husband, Serkan, said to me, you need my permission to take them out of the country because of the divorce proceedings. And he held that over me. And it was basically not implied. I mean, he basically told me, if you don't allow me back into your life, I'm not signing the paper for them to go, and they'll be so disappointed, and your sister will be disappointed. So yeah, I gave in. And there were other things as well that aren't in the book. He had a lot of control. He basically used every tactic in his weaponry. I mean, the car was in his name, and yeah, he was just using all of these things. I'll do what you want if you do what I want, and all I want is to be friends, which sounds very reasonable because that's what I wanted too. At the end of the day, I wanted to be friends with this person because I was married to him for a long time, and I felt like the stuff that had happened, but we could move past that. We have children. I wanted to be friends for the children, maybe not friends, but amicable for the children. But this is a very Western way of thinking. I was thinking like a Westerner, and that it doesn't seem to be how they think.
Okay, so let's move on with the story then. So divorce proceedings are in theory going through. You've got a lawyer who's been very supportive to you.
Yeah.
You met somebody else.
Well, the divorce proceedings, they say, were going through. They were dragging because my husband owned the villa. It was in his name, and we needed his signature to sell it. And he had agreed that he would sell it because we had agreed to split the properties kind of 50-50. I wanted to sell the villa and then buy somewhere else. He wanted these apartments. So we had agreed that, but when it came to selling, he kept delaying and, dragging his feet deliberately because the way my lawyer wanted to do it was sell everything first and then present the court with a settlement and then sign the paper rather than drag it through court. So without the villa being sold, we couldn't progress. So it was progressing, but really slowly. And he was denying it, of course. He was saying, no, I'm not delaying anything. I haven't found the right buyer yet and all that. But it went on and on. And it was a year later, almost to the day that I met someone else. So I left the villa, or I left him in November the previous year. And I met the new guy in November the following year. So there was a year. It wasn't that quick. It feels quick now, but it actually wasn't. It was a year. It was a year later.
It must have been a complete shock then, with really all of this that was going on, and it was certainly not plain sailing. You meet somebody.
I didn't plan to meet somebody.
No, I'm sure you didn't. You just thought, right, I just want, a life with me and my children, and let's take a big deep breath and look towards the future.
I think there were several things with Barbaros. There was an intense chemistry between us from the get-go. I can't explain it. I've never known anything like it before or since. It was bizarre. So, and also there was a certain, I was getting angry with the situation because nothing was moving forward. My ex-husband still had control of me. He was still calling the shots. I still couldn't move on. I was hard up for money because of him. He was delaying the sale of the villa, which would have allowed me to divorce him and move on, which is all I wanted. And he was once again, so there was a certain kind of, and my friends were saying, come on, meet someone else, live your life. Why are you afraid of this man? Like, you're not with him. But I was terrified of him. And I knew that if I was seen around with someone else, that would be the end, because whether we're divorced or not, he doesn't see it like that. So I didn't want to meet someone else. So there were two things. There was kind of, why shouldn't I move on? Like, I'm not with him anymore. And there was also a certain resentment of the fact that he was still in control after all I had gone through. He was still in control. And this could have dragged on and on for another year or 2 years.
So you met this man, and as you say, the chemistry was just from the very beginning.
Well, there was a lot of chemistry there in the beginning. I mean, in the book I talk about the sexual aspect of my marriage, which was basically coerced sex. It was awful. It was not something that was at all enjoyable for me. It was something that I had to do because if I didn't, there would be consequences, which is also a very common aspect of domestic abuse that people don't talk about. It's not rape. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's rape because there was no physical constraining, but there were severe consequences if I didn't do what he wanted. So to go from that to what I had with Barbaros, there was intense sexual chemistry there, which was in stark contrast to what I had with my husband, which was horrendous. So there was that side of it, but honestly, when I met him, I wasn't looking for a relationship, definitely. I was looking for fun. There was this attraction between us. He was everything my ex-husband wasn't, like absolute polar opposite. He was charming. He was very intelligent, well-educated, very softly spoken, superb looking. Just complete polar opposite. I mean, I had a friend recently, someone who also read the book, saying, she was a bit judgmental maybe. She said, to fall for this once is one thing, but to fall for the second guy. But I was kind of like, but they had nothing in common with each other. That's like me saying never date anyone ever again, because they were not the same, other than they had the same nationality. But that's the country I was in. So obviously most people I meet are going to be Turkish because that's where I was living. But they had nothing in common with each other. I was really very, I was just looking for fun basically with him, and a bit of, I wanted to feel good about myself, and he did that. He made me feel attractive. He made me feel like we had fun together. We just got on very well, but it was never meant to be serious. I wasn't looking for serious. I just got out of a marriage, a long marriage, and I didn't want anything serious with him. What happened with Barbaros is when we had to run for our lives, I think there was a certain amount of trauma bonding that went on, because he saved me, I suppose, and I started to fall for him later, like really fall for him, but it wasn't straight away. The attraction was there straight away, but the love did not come. It came much later because of the situation we were forced. So my ex-husband kind of forced us together, which I think is the opposite of what he wanted to do. Had he not, it might have fizzled out. But yeah, we ended up in this horrific situation, the two of us, and we only had each other, and yeah.
As you say, we don't want to give too much about the story in the book. At the moment, Barbaros sounds a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
But there is more to that.
There is, yeah. There are things there's a twist.
There's definitely a twist in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're not going to cover that. But one thing that was a real shock to me in the book was your lawyer.
Yeah.
I wanted to go in there and...
Yeah, she let me down.
Yeah.
She did let me down.
You know, you're going through this terrible situation, and you found a female lawyer, and she is saying, you will have protection, you've got a good lawyer, the police, we can put things in place. You put your trust in this woman.
Yeah.
And she did the dirty on you.
Well, she kind of did a little bit, but I think to get things into context, when she told me those things, they were absolutely true. All of those things were true.
The good things about you will be protected, for example.
There are laws in Turkey to protect me. I had everything in my favour. I had a lawyer. I had, she wasn't lying about those things. They were true. What we underestimated was my ex-husband's ability or determination to pursue me at all costs and to pursue his pride. Because I think that's the crux of it. I think when I left him, it damaged his pride and his ego, because again, it's this whole culture of the men laughing.
He couldn't keep a wife happy,
his wife
regardless of what was going
his wife's
on
left him
behind
and he's with
closed doors.
someone else, which is even more of an insult. It's all to do with honour, and I dishonoured him by not only leaving him but meeting another guy. This is dishonourable, and we didn't know the lengths to which he would go, to seek revenge on me, basically. And I think my lawyer spoke the truth as far as she knew it. He also threatened her. Don't forget, he was a large man, as I say. He had a lot of friends, some of them not very nice. And they threatened her family, told her to stay away from me, not to help me. So I do get why she didn't. But it was also, again, with hindsight, I wouldn't have hired her as my lawyer because she was a good friend. I would have hired someone else. That was a mistake on my part because I don't think necessarily business and friendship mix well. I should have hired someone completely objective, because he knew where she lived. He was harassing her. He started harassing her while this was all going on. So I don't blame her at all, actually, for what she. We've spoken since. We're no longer close, but we exchange a message now and again. And
let's move the story on then. You've met this man and everything is wonderful.
With him, yes, in the beginning, yeah. He was my absolute rock. I couldn't have done any of this stuff without him, because I was broken, completely broken, and he would just help me up, completely help me up, and he was phenomenal.
But then there's a twist in the story.
There is, later.
There is a twist in the story. Let's talk about leaving Turkey.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You left Turkey with your daughter, not your son.
Yeah.
Can we
of course,
talk a little bit about that?
This was another quite important thread in the story, that, the manipulation and the attempts to control the narrative by my ex-husband. The thing is, I didn't really see it from him, even though I knew he could be aggressive and violent and hot-headed. I didn't see that he would do the things that he did. So even while they were happening, I didn't want to believe them, because this is someone I've been married to for a long time. And so basically what happened with my son is, at this wedding that I was manipulated into my husband to be amicable with him, which was actually fine, I didn't mind. But he agreed to let us go to the wedding. So we went to the wedding. After that, I trusted him a little bit because I'm like, oh, thank you for letting us go. You know, the kids had a great time. And he's like, oh, yeah, this is all I want. I just want to be friends with you. I just want it to, you know, I know I've lost you. He said, I know I've lost you. I see that now. I see why. I'm just so happy that we can be friends and that I get to spend time with my kids. Okay, great. He's saying all the right things. Finally, this is perfect. This is going well. But then, so while we were at my sister's wedding or during the few days either side of it, my daughter broke her toe. To this day I have no idea how it happened, but she came into the bedroom, she had a broken toe, and x-ray confirmed it was broken. And they would go while I was working to a childminder during the day, and they were out all day at the pool or at the beach doing things with the childminder, and she couldn't because she had a broken toe. So I said to my husband, I'm going to take her to work with me, because it was a hospital translation office. She could sit on the sofa, she was fine. And he says, what are you going to do about Jem? I said, well, he'll still go to the childminder. By this point, I was absolutely hard up for cash. I had no money. I was paying for an apartment I couldn't afford, paying for childcare I couldn't afford. And he said to me, come on, let me take care of him. I want to be a dad. Let me be a dad. I want to take care of him. I'll take care of him while you're at work. You pick him up afterwards. It'll be fine. I don't want you spending your money on a childminder. Like, let me help you. Let me be a dad. I've really missed the kids. I really want to be a dad. So I had, you know, you get that gut feeling and you feel like something's not right here. I don't like this. But I thought, he's actually speaking the truth. It makes sense. And Jem was like, oh yeah, let me stay with him. Please, Mom, please, let me stay with Baba. Because he adored his dad. You know, there was always that relationship there. So I said, okay, just until her toe's healed. For the next 3 weeks, she's going to be on crutches. For 3 weeks, he can stay with you while I'm at work. Okay, great. He said, great. Okay, so that seemed like a good solution. And then after the 3 weeks were up, Jem changed. Something in him changed. He wouldn't look at me. He was 6, but he was really, something was different. He wouldn't look at me. He was kind of sulky with me. He refused to come back to my flat with me and his sister. He wanted to stay with his dad all the time, during the weekend, all the time. And I couldn't do anything. I was powerless, because how do you drag a 6-year-old kicking and screaming? He didn't want to come with me. And I spoke to Sarah and I said, are you saying something? Is your mum saying something? No, of course not. No, of course not. He's confused. He's a child. You know, he's just getting things straight in his head. Just let him stay with me for a bit. He'll be fine. So this went on kind of all summer. And then towards the end of the summer, I said, okay, he has to come back now because school's starting. And he said to me, he wants to stay with me. I've enrolled him in a new school and I'm filing for custody. And I mean, literally, my world fell apart because I hadn't seen it coming. I had sleepwalked into it. I had sleepwalked into this situation. So I spoke to my lawyer and she said, you know, the chances are he'll get custody because he's been living with him for the past couple of months. He wants to stay with him. And then she said to me, which I felt was strange coming from one mother to another, you know, it's not the worst thing. He can have custody. You have custody of Elif, your daughter. You can carry on like you are. There's no difference. It's just a legal paper. You'll still see it. They'll still see each other. They'll still be in the same town. It's not the end of the world. And she said, you can fight this if you want in court, but it will drag on and on. It will probably go on for at least another 2 years. It'll get really acrimonious. You probably will lose because this is the situation. So I very reluctantly, and again, I had that awful feeling that I was making a huge mistake. I very reluctantly agreed because the thing is, in Turkey, there's no shared custody. So I got custody of Elif, he got custody of Jem. And that was kind of the beginning. So basically what happened when I was forced out of Maralia, the town where I was living, both my children were with Serkan because they were with him. It was their day to have them. And I had no choice but to leave them behind. I then fought to get Elif back legally. Nothing was happening, no one would help me, and I ended up snatching her from her school because I didn't have anywhere. I had no other alternative than to take her. So when I had to leave Turkey, I had to leave Jem because I don't have custody of him. Yeah. So again, with hindsight, I would never have signed over custody of him, ever.
Caroline, this story is just incredible. And
it's truth is stranger than fiction, they say.
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, when you're telling your story, I'm just thinking of the emotions. I have no idea how you felt, but just thinking about, you must have felt this, you must have felt that. And that is probably such a small feeling compared to how you were feeling actually in this situation at the time. We don't want to give any more of the story away, but one thing I want to talk about is, first of all, what made you decide to write this story?
Well, writing is something that I've always done. It's like breathing to me. For as long as I can remember, as soon as I was old enough to pick up a pen and paper, I've written diaries, short stories, journals. Writing is how I kind of express myself, clear my head. I've always written things down. I like to write things down so that when they're on the page, I can see them clearly and I can actually see what happened. And it's just like a way of coping with me. So when I was traveling through Europe with my daughter, when we had escaped from Turkey, I was having these awful, you know, that when you wake up at like 3 a.m, terrified, and I would have these waking up at 3 a.m, just thoughts just going through my head, like, what have you done? You have made a massive mistake. What on earth are you going to do now? Like, where are you going to go? You haven't thought this through. You're traveling with a 9-year-old and you have no plan for your future. Like, all these awful, terrifying thoughts. And I thought, you know what? I need to write this stuff down. I need to just write it down just to make sense of it. And that's kind of how the book started. And I took there's a chapter in the book where I'm in Venice, and I woke up one morning and I didn't have the panicky, horrible feeling. I was actually completely calm. I had this kind of like epiphany, I suppose, where I just realized everything is going to be completely okay. It's all going to be okay. And you know, I knew that. I don't know how I knew it, but I knew it. And it kind of came from somewhere outside myself or inside myself, I don't know, but it was a feeling of complete peace. And I thought to myself, you know, he has taken away your life, but he's given you a new life. He's given you, like, you can do whatever you want now. You can literally do what you've always dreamed of, which was be a writer. And it suddenly all kind of came clear. I thought, wow, that's true. I'm not under his control anymore. I'm actually completely free. I can start again. And although that's a terrifying prospect, it's also an amazing prospect to be given that opportunity to start again. So I started writing the book while I was traveling to help me deal with these emotions I was feeling and to kind of make sense of what happened. And then when I arrived here, I just continued. I got a laptop, first thing I bought, and I would spend hours and hours and hours just writing this thing down, just writing all day, writing it down in no form. It was just a mishmash of all these different things that had happened. And that it was for myself, it was like a cathartic process of just thinking about what had happened and, you know, making sense of it. And then I just kept writing and I kept like tweaking it and, you know, playing with it and making it into chapters and adding that bit. And then I decided to do it as a dual timeline because I felt that the main story is quite heavy and I felt it needed breaking up a little bit to give it some light relief. So I did it like forward and back. So I'm traveling through Europe with my daughter and going back to how we ended up in this situation to be driving through Europe. But yeah, the writing was, to me, saved me. That and my daughter. Like, without those two things, I don't know if I would have, you know, come through it. Like, I had to be strong for her. I had to get up for her. I had to take her to school. I had to find a place to live for her. And the writing was kind of something that I did for myself because it's something I've always done. It's just what I do.
We're sitting here, you know, I've got the book in my hand now. Mm-hmm. Do you feel there's a lot of distance between you and this story?
Yeah, now yes.
You can breathe now and you've got it down in a book and that book is out there. Yeah. There is distance.
Definitely a lot. And this is another thing that I think was super important for me to write the book, is it did give me distance. Like, I can say that now, that chapter is closed. I mean, it's kind of close anyway because I've moved on. I'm a very different person. But yeah, it's something that doesn't affect me the way it did. I mean, when I first arrived in Spain, I was having a horrific time. I was having panic attacks, nightmares, just, really scared that he was going to come from somewhere. I don't know how, he didn't know where I was, but I felt like he is going to find me. And this isn't over. And that went on for a really long time. And now I don't feel like that at all. I mean, I feel like it's I've closed the book, to use a cheesy phrase, but the book is, it's over.
One thing I want to ask you about the book, the cover of the book, you have got this beautiful candle with floating hearts.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. What made you come up with this idea for the cover?
Okay, so the candle was something that my dad bought me for Christmas. There was a Christmas day, there's a chapter in the book that's set on Christmas Day, and we had been through a lot, awful divorce, my husband dragging his feet. That Christmas Day was perfect. My dad was there, Jem, my son, was coming back spending time with me again, the divorce was finalised, the villa was sold. Everything seemed to be coming together, and I was having this new exciting relationship, for want of a better word, with this gorgeous guy, Barbaros. Everything was coming. I thought, that's it, I'm done, it's over. I can have the life I wanted. I can stay here in this beautiful country, in this beautiful town. My children can stay here. I'm getting on okay with Serkan. I have this new hot lover. Me and Jem are kind of building our relationship. He's 6, he was fine. They get over these things quite quickly, and we were quite good. And my dad had bought me this candle, and as we had Christmas lunch, the candle was in the middle of the table, and what happens is when you light the candle, it's like a silver tea light holder. When you light the candle, the hearts spin around, the heat of the flame makes the candle. It just kind of symbolized hope for the future, happiness, all of those things. And when I had to escape, I held it with me, I took it with me on my journey, and I've still got it. And it's like, to me, it's just hope and happiness, and I wanted that on the cover because I want women to see, any women that are in my situation, that this symbolizes the future, and that things will be okay no matter how bad they get, and they got pretty bad for me. So if I can come back, anyone can come back.
I mean, you have been incredibly honest about your story. You have written your story. It's out there for people to read. We hear about domestic abuse, sexual abuse, financial abuse, mental abuse in relationships. Yeah. The good thing is we are talking about it now.
Yeah.
If anybody is listening to this and somebody is thinking, okay, certain things are happening, as you put it, a couple of red flags, what would you say to somebody who may just not, or maybe thinking something isn't right?
Yeah.
What would you say to that woman?
It's so difficult, because the thing is, I was that woman, and I didn't tell anyone about it because I was ashamed, embarrassed. I couldn't see a solution. I was actually complicit in my own abuse because I would cover up for him. Like I would tell people that we were fine, and nobody ever witnessed any of these rages. So I don't know what I would say to make me change my mind, other than I think I would just tell them, please don't stay in that situation, because my only regret is that I should have left years earlier. I should not have stayed as long as I did. I think talk to someone. In the UK, certainly there is support for women in these situations. I think it's terrifying, but you can get out, you can get support. You have to be incredibly strong, but you are. You don't know how strong you are. And you can have a different life, you really can. And you're just worth more. I think, when something doesn't feel right, like I think as well, we need to stop making excuses for these men because we love them. That's what we do. I think it's a thing we commonly do as women is we overlook things because we don't want them to feel bad, or because we try and see it from their point of view. I think don't do that. Like, have very clear boundaries and talk to someone. But the problem when I say talk to someone is quite often with these situations, this actually wasn't the case with mine, but a lot of abusive relationships, domestic abuse relationships, they knowingly isolate you from your support network. Or maybe, like, for example, when I married him, I had a lot of people say, "What are you doing marrying a Turkish man? You know, what are you doing?" Like, and it made me, because we were happy for a very long time, I kind of, when things started to go wrong, I didn't want to admit that they were going wrong, because I felt that there would be an element of "I told you so," even after that amount of time had gone by. You know, we were 12 years quite happy, actually, probably longer, maybe 14 years quite happy. And when things started to go wrong, there was, you know, I think it's difficult to reach out and say, you know what, things are not working and I do need support and I do need help. But I would say try and do that to somebody, be it a helpline, be it a friend. But you have to be prepared as the friend or the parent or the relative that somebody may reach out and then they may go back. That's likely. Okay, it's likely. It's not easy to just walk away. And then they may be afraid that they've reached out once too many and gone back once too many times and you're no longer there. I think you just have to be there as a friend of someone who's going through that. Be there whenever they need you, whenever they're ready. And there will be relapses because these things are complicated. If you're going through it, I would just say just get out as soon as you possibly can, and don't allow somebody to treat you like that and disrespect you and damage your children's childhood. That's the thing. I'm not really very good at giving advice because I'm trying to picture myself in that situation and whether I would have listened, and probably not. I think as well, women have to come to that decision on their own. Like I did. I came to the decision on my own to leave, and once I had made that decision, that was it. There was no going back. But it took a long time for me to get to that point. But I think you need people who are there for you, like properly there for you. I mean, you know, my family weren't as there for me as they could have been, with the exception of my dad. He was great. But I had friends like Marie in the book. Marie was not a super close friend of mine. She was someone I knew, had lunch with from time to time. She was 100% there for me. That's who you need. You need people like that who will tell you this is what you have to do and I'm next to you, and do it and be there. Yeah.
Caroline, what can I say? Your honesty in the book, it's not an easy read. It's not a pretty read. Yes, we feel we want to grab you by the shoulders and shake you.
Sometimes, yeah.
You're incredibly brave writing your story, going through everything you went through again, but you've come out the other side. You've built an amazing life for you and your daughter.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, I'm in contact with my son now, so we're fine. We were talking last night. I mean, things heal, time heals. So yeah, it's just taking those brave steps of, you know, be prepared to go through some hard times, but you will come out the other side and you will be fine. You'll be better than fine. And then the only regret you'll have is, oh, why didn't I do this years ago?
So as the title of book says, The Other Side of Fear. Mm. So Caroline, thank you so much for coming on the All About You podcast. If this conversation helps one person...
Right, exactly.
You've done your
job. I think the book is a tough read, definitely, but I hope it also offers hope to women in my situation. I really do. And just, you know, raising awareness of how complex this issue is. It's not just as, you know, people would say to me, why don't you just leave? Well, read the book, this is why. Yeah, it's not easy.
It's not that easy at all. So Caroline, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So thank you for listening to our conversation, and please subscribe for future episodes. It is free. And if you have a story to tell, please contact me on allaboutyoupodcast@yahoo.com and let's tell your story.